From the very first moment the cameras rolled on the Slatton family, viewers could sense that something extraordinary was about to unfold. There was always an air of unpredictability, a rawness that set the sisters apart from other reality stars. They weren't polished Hollywood celebrities with perfect scripts and controlled narratives. They were real, unfiltered, messy, and heartbreakingly human. But what fans never knew was that one of the most shocking, gut-wrenching moments ever captured on camera was never aired. And at the center of it all was Amy Slaton, who, for the first time, allowed the world to see a part of her soul that she had buried for years. This was not the Amy who cracked jokes to lighten the mood or who tried to smile through the pain. This was Amy stripped bare, confronted with her biggest fear, and breaking down in a way that left everyone in the room silent, stunned, and shaken to their core. Amy's story had always been complicated. Behind every laugh, every silly moment she shared with Tammy, there was a heaviness that followed her like a shadow. Growing up in Kentucky, Amy carried not just her own struggles, but also the weight of her sister's battles. She was more than just Tammy's sidekick. She was her protector, her caregiver, and sometimes the only person standing between her sister and total collapse. That kind of responsibility, especially when you're young, leaves scars that don't always show. And for Amy, those scars had been there long before the cameras came along. By the time the world met her, she had already survived years of ridicule, judgment, and self-doubt. When TLC first offered to feature her and Tammy in a series, Amy saw it as a chance to rewrite her story. She wanted to show the world who she really was, a woman with dreams, with love to give, and with a burning desire to be seen for more than just her size. But fame has a way of twisting even the best intentions. For every fan who cheered her on, there were others who picked apart her every move. Every outfit, every word, every choice was dissected by strangers on the internet. The pressure built quietly at first, but soon it became a storm Amy could not escape. And yet, through all of this, she tried to put on a brave face. She became a mother, and for a while, that gave her a sense of strength she hadn't felt before. Her children were her world, the reason she kept pushing forward even when the weight of fame threatened to crush her. But there came a day, in front of the cameras, when all of that strength gave way. No one expected it, not the producers, not Tammy, not the crew who had been with her for years. They thought they had seen Amy at her lowest, but nothing compared to what happened in that unaired scene. The setup was simple, just another day of filming, another attempt at capturing the reality of the sisters' lives. But something inside Amy snapped. She began speaking, her voice shaking at first, almost as if she was testing whether she had the courage to say what she'd been holding back. And then the floodgates opened. She spoke about her fears, about how she felt like she was drowning under the weight of expectations, about the pain of being judged not only as a woman but as a mother. She said she felt like no matter what she did, it would never be enough. The crew, usually so quick to adjust cameras or direct the action, froze. Some of them lowered their equipment, realizing that what they were witnessing wasn't entertainment, it was a human being unraveling. Amy's tears came fast, and with them, a raw honesty that cut through the room. She spoke about nights when she would lie awake, terrified that she wasn't a good enough mom, that her kids would grow up resenting her, that she would fail them in the same way she felt the world had failed her. It was the kind of confession that no amount of editing could soften, and it left everyone shaken. Tammy, who was often the center of chaos herself, was silent. For once, she had no words, no sarcastic quips, no anger. She just sat there, staring at her sister as though seeing her for the first time. Because for all of Tammy's struggles, she had never witnessed Amy like this, broken, vulnerable, and desperately trying to hold herself together. The air in the room was heavy, thick with a sadness that was almost unbearable. Why didn't the world see this moment? Why was it left on the cutting room floor? The answer is complicated. On one hand, reality TV thrives on drama, but there are moments that cross the line from dramatic to devastating. The producers knew that showing Amy like this could spark outrage, not against her, but against them. People would question why the cameras kept rolling, why no one stepped in to comfort her, why the breakdown of a young mother was treated as content. They made the call to cut it, to bury it deep in the archives, hoping it would never see the light of day. But those who were there, who heard Amy's words and saw the tears streaming down her face, would never forget it. What makes this moment even more haunting is that it wasn't just about that single breakdown, it was about everything that had led up to it. Years of being mocked for her appearance, years of carrying Tammy's pain on her shoulders, years of being painted as both a hero and a villain in the eyes of fans, and most of all, years of doubting herself as a mother. That breakdown was the culmination of a lifetime of battles. finally boiling over in a single, unforgettable moment. Even though the footage never aired, whispers of it spread among those who knew. Some of the crew reportedly admitted that it was one of the hardest things they had ever witnessed on set. A few even questioned whether the show should go on, whether the toll it was taking on the Slaton family was worth the ratings and the fame. But for Amy, the damage was already done. She couldn't take back the words she had spoken, couldn't erase the vulnerability she had shown. In some ways, it changed her forever. And yet, as broken as she felt in that moment, there was also something quietly powerful about it. Because in her honesty, Amy revealed a truth that so many women, especially mothers, carry but rarely speak aloud. The fear of not being enough. That fear, raw and unfiltered, was what connected her to so many fans in the first place. They didn't love her because she was perfect, they loved her because she was real. But for Amy, that realization came later. In the moment, all she felt was exposed, fragile, and unsure of what came next. The producers may have chosen to hide the footage, but Amy's truth couldn't be hidden forever. The cracks in her armor were visible now, and the question became, how would she move forward from here? The days that followed Amy's breakdown were some of the most difficult she had ever faced. To the outside world, nothing had changed. She still smiled when the cameras were on, still played her role as the sweet, supportive sister. But inside, she was unraveling. Every time she looked at her kids, she felt the weight of her confession pressing down harder. Was she really failing them? Would they grow up someday and see her the way critics online did? Flawed, unstable, and incapable of handling her own life. Those questions haunted her, echoing late at night when she lay in bed trying to sleep. Tammy, for once, seemed to understand the gravity of what had happened. For years, Amy had been the one to pick Tammy up after a fall, to wipe her tears when things got too overwhelming, to remind her that she wasn't alone. But now the roles were reversed, and Tammy didn't know what to do. She wasn't good at comfort, wasn't good at expressing feelings in a gentle way. Her instinct was always to lash out, to hide behind anger. Yet in the quiet after Amy's breakdown, Tammy started showing a side of herself that few people ever saw. She became quieter, more thoughtful, almost protective. When crew members whispered about Amy, Tammy would shut them down. When producers tried to push for bigger storylines, Tammy, who usually craved attention, pushed back. For once, she wasn't the one demanding the spotlight, she was trying to shield her sister from it. But reality television doesn't slow down just because someone is hurting. The schedule was relentless, the pressure constant. Producers were scrambling behind the scenes, trying to figure out how to reshape storylines now that Amy's emotions were spilling over in unpredictable ways. They wanted drama, but not too much. They wanted honesty, but not the kind that made audiences uncomfortable. And most of all, they wanted control. Amy's breakdown had shown them just how little control they actually had. The internet, meanwhile, was buzzing with speculation. Fans noticed the subtle changes, the moments when Amy seemed distant, the times when her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Reddit threads and Facebook groups lit up with theories. Something's going on with Amy. One fan wrote, "She looks sad all the time." Another posted side-by-side screenshots comparing old episodes to new ones, pointing out how tired and drained Amy seemed. Some guessed it was postpartum depression, others said it was the stress of raising two kids while filming a reality show. But no one knew the truth. No one outside of that room had seen the breakdown. Amy's husband tried to support her, but even he didn't fully grasp the depth of what she was going through. To him, it looked like stress, the kind of exhaustion every new parent faced. But to Amy, it was something much darker, heavier. It wasn't just about sleepless nights or endless filming. It was about the crushing feeling that she was trapped in a life that wasn't entirely hers anymore. The cameras followed her everywhere, capturing not just her victories but her failures. And the more she tried to be strong, the more it felt like the world was waiting for her to collapse again. What made it worse was that Amy couldn't escape the online world. She would log onto social media, hoping for encouragement, and instead be met with cruel comments about her weight, her parenting, her marriage. Strangers picked apart the most intimate details of her life, as if she were a character in a show rather than a real woman with feelings. She's lazy. She's not fit to be a mom. Her kids are doomed. Those words cut deep, especially when she was already doubting herself. It was like the world was confirming her worst fears. Still, there were moments of light in the darkness. Her children, innocent and unaware of the chaos surrounding their mother, gave her reasons to keep going. When her baby smiled at her or wrapped tiny fingers around her hand, Amy felt a surge of love that drowned out the noise. If only for a moment. And Tammy, surprisingly, became another source of unexpected comfort. Their relationship had always been complicated, full of fights, reconciliations, and more fights, but in this chapter of their lives, Tammy seemed determined not to let her sister face the storm alone. She would crack jokes at just the right time, pull Amy into conversations when she tried to retreat, and, most importantly, remind her that she wasn't a bad mom. But Amy's breakdown had left a crack in the family's foundation, and once a crack appears, it's hard to stop it from spreading. The producers saw an opportunity to build new storylines around Amy's struggles. They pushed harder for her to talk about her feelings on camera, to open up about her doubts and fears. At first, Amy resisted, terrified of being exposed, like she had been during that unaired scene. But eventually, under the weight of contracts, obligations, and persuasion, she started to let little pieces slip. She would admit to being tired, admit to feeling overwhelmed. What the audience didn't know was that those small admissions were fragments of a much larger storm she was desperately trying to contain. The tension reached a boiling point during one particular filming day. Amy had agreed to sit down for a one-on-one interview, the kind where producers would ask probing questions while the cameras zoomed in on her face. She had done hundreds of them by now, but this one felt different. The questions cut deeper, poking at the insecurities she had been trying so hard to bury. Do you feel like you're doing a good job as a mom? Do you think you've lost yourself since having kids? Do you ever regret putting your life on TV? Each question was like a knife, twisting in wounds that had barely started to heal. Amy tried to answer calmly, but her voice kept breaking. She looked away from the camera, blinking back tears, her chest tightening as the familiar sense of panic rose inside her. Finally, she snapped. She ripped off her microphone, threw it to the ground, and shouted at the crew to leave her alone. It was the second breakdown, even more explosive than the first. And this time, the producers didn't cut the cameras. They captured every second. The anger, the tears, the raw desperation of a woman who felt like she was being pushed past her limit. Word of that meltdown eventually leaked. Even though the footage wasn't immediately aired, crew members whispered, tabloids speculated, and fans started piecing together clues. By now, the Slaton family wasn't just reality TV fodder. They had become symbols of something larger: the price of fame, the dangers of exploitation, and the fragility of human beings under constant public scrutiny. Amy's pain was no longer just her own. It had become a reflection of everything wrong with the industry that built her up and then fed on her struggles. Behind the scenes, conversations grew darker. Some wondered if Amy would quit the show altogether, just walk away and disappear from the cameras for good. Others speculated that TLC would never let her go. Not when her breakdowns were pulling in massive attention and driving the show's ratings higher than ever. After all, reality television thrives on pain, and Amy's suffering had become the new centerpiece of the drama. The more broken she appeared, the more invested viewers became. And yet, through it all, Amy still clung to one fragile hope. That maybe, just maybe, her honesty could mean something. That maybe by sharing her struggles, by showing the world how hard it really was, she could connect with someone out there who felt the same. She didn't want to be a cautionary tale. She wanted to be proof that even when you're at your lowest, you can still keep fighting. But the fight was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. Because what Amy didn't know was that the next chapter of her journey would bring even greater challenges, deeper pain, and choices that could change everything, not just for her, but for her family, her children, and the future of the show itself. By the time the cameras rolled again in the weeks after her second breakdown, Amy was a different person. Not broken beyond repair, but changed in a way that everyone around her could feel. She moved slower, spoke softer, and seemed to retreat inward more often, as if conserving her energy for the only things that truly mattered: her children. To fans, she still smiled and laughed, but those closest to her could see the weight pressing down. She was balancing on a tightrope, performing for the world while carrying the unbearable fear that one wrong step could cost her everything. Her relationship with Tammy shifted during this period in ways no one could have predicted. For years, the narrative was simple. Amy was the caretaker, Tammy the dependent. But now, the roles blurred. Tammy, despite her own struggles, became fiercely protective. She clashed with producers, fought with crew members, and even snapped at family members who she thought weren't being sensitive enough to Amy's pain. "Y'all don't see it," she once muttered when the cameras weren't rolling. "She's drowning, and you just keep asking her to smile." It was one of the rare times Tammy's words cut through the chaos with clarity. Still, the demands of reality television didn't let up. TLC had already invested too much, and drama was what kept the audience coming back. Amy's breakdowns had ignited speculation online, and producers saw no reason to slow down when interest was peaking. Every moment of hesitation from Amy, every tear, every sign of doubt, it was all fodder for the storylines they were building. And as much as Amy hated it, she knew deep down that she couldn't walk away. The show wasn't just her platform. It was her paycheck, her stability, her way of providing for her children. Walking away would mean losing the financial security that held her family together. The pressure built quietly at first, in ways most wouldn't even notice. A longer filming day here, a more invasive interview there, suggestions from producers to open up just a little more or share how you're really feeling. Amy complied, but each compliance left her a little more hollow inside. Off camera, she admitted to Tammy that she felt like a puppet. "I don't even know if I'm me anymore," she whispered one night, rocking her youngest to sleep. "I'm just whatever they want me to be." Tammy didn't know how to respond. For once, even she couldn't find the right words. The turning point came during what was supposed to be a routine family dinner shoot. The Slaton family had gathered around the table, food laid out in front of them, cameras positioned to capture every angle. At first, it was like jokes, small talk, the usual banter that audiences loved. But then, as the producers prodded, the conversation turned. They asked Amy about her kids, about whether she felt she was handling motherhood well. Amy froze. Her fork trembled in her hand. The silence stretched too long, and everyone knew something was wrong. Then the words slipped out before she could stop them. "Sometimes I'm scared I'm not enough for them." The room fell silent. Tammy reached across the table, trying to grab her sister's hand, but Amy pulled away. Tears filled her eyes as she continued, voice shaking. "What if they grow up hating me? What if all they remember is me being tired, me being sad, me not being there when they needed me?" The cameras caught everything. The rawness of her confession, the way her face crumpled under the weight of it. The way she buried her face in her hands and sobbed at the table while her family sat stunned. Tammy muttered something under her breath, angry that the crew kept filming, but the producers didn't stop. They leaned in, sensing that this was the kind of footage that could define an entire season. The aftermath was brutal. Fans who eventually saw glimpses of the scene were divided. Some praised Amy for her honesty, calling her brave for sharing the fears that so many mothers feel but rarely voice. Others, however, were cruel. "She's unstable. She doesn't deserve those kids. This is what happens when you put fame before family." The comments flooded social media, and Amy saw every single one. She tried to ignore them, but late at night, when the house was quiet and the kids were asleep, she scrolled through the words, letting them cut deeper than she wanted to admit. Her mental health spiraled. Friends noticed she was more withdrawn, harder to reach. She canceled plans, avoided phone calls, and spent hours in her room journaling, trying to process the chaos. In her private writings, she poured out her darkest thoughts. She admitted to feeling like she was trapped in a cycle she couldn't escape, loved by millions, yet judged by them just as harshly. Adored for her resilience, yet exploited for her pain. "I just want to be Amy," she wrote. "Not Amy from TV. Not Amy the mom everyone's watching. Just me. Amy the mom everyone's watching. Just me." Yet even in the darkest moments, there were sparks of resilience. Her children were her anchor, pulling her back every time she felt like she was drifting too far. Their laughter, their innocence, their unconditional love reminded her that no matter what the world said, she was still their mother, still their safe place. And Tammy, in her own flawed way, continued to stand by her. Their relationship was messy, complicated, full of fights and reconciliations, but at its core, it was unbreakable. "We're all we got," Tammy told her one night. "We fall, we fight, we cry, but at the end of the day, we're still us." What fans never saw, and what TLC never aired, was the toll all of this took on Amy's physical health. Stress manifested in sleepless nights, constant fatigue, and bouts of illness that went unspoken on camera. Doctors warned her that she was pushing herself too hard, that her body couldn't keep up with the constant demands of fame and motherhood. But how could she slow down? The show needed her. Her family needed her. And somewhere deep inside, she felt that her fans needed her too. The never-aired footage of her first breakdown became something of a ghost, haunting both the production crew and Amy herself. Insiders whispered about it, fans speculated about it, and Amy tried not to think about it, but she couldn't forget. That moment, captured in silence and tears, was the truest version of herself the cameras had ever recorded. And yet it remained hidden, locked away in archives, deemed too raw, too uncomfortable, too real for television. As time went on, Amy began to accept something that both terrified and empowered her. She couldn't control the narrative anymore. TLC would spin her life however they wanted. Fans would judge her no matter what she did. Strangers would dissect every choice, every word, every tear. But in her heart, she knew the truth. She knew she loved her children fiercely, that she was trying harder than anyone could see, that she was fighting battles most people couldn't imagine, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The story of Amy Slaton isn't just one of weight loss, or reality TV fame, or even motherhood under scrutiny. It's the story of a woman who has been stretched to her limits, who has been pushed, prodded, and torn apart for the world's entertainment, yet who continues to stand shaken, scarred, but still standing. It's the story of resilience in the face of exploitation, of love in the face of judgment, of vulnerability in the face of cameras that never stop rolling. And as the credits roll on another season of her life, one truth remains undeniable. Amy's journey is far from over. The battles will continue. The scrutiny will never fade. But so will her strength, her love, and her fight. For her children, for herself, for the chance to prove that behind every headline, every edited episode, every cruel comment, there is a woman who refuses to be defined by anything but her own heart. Because in the end, Amy Slaton is more than a reality star. She is a mother, a sister, a fighter. And though the world may never see the full truth, those who know her best understand. Her story is one of survival, of breaking down and building back up again, of finding light even in the darkest corners. And no matter how many cameras capture her, the real Amy will always shine through in the places that matter most quietly, fiercely, and with a love that refuses to be broken.